Hi, and welcome to Sacred Spaces. My name's Michaela Drieberg, and today we're going to Soho Village, which is in Point Cook in Melbourne's outer western suburbs. We've been joined today by Jordan Curran and Dean Landy, who'll tell us a little bit more about what is a really unique development in this suburb. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit why a development like this is unique.
I guess the unique opportunity that was presented with Soho Village was that we're able to introduce almost an urban style of living in what would be otherwise fairly standard suburban development and be able to bring that lifestyle choice to residents and future residents beyond just the standard 4-bedroom house.
And this is something that's quite dear to your heart. You've actually written a book about this whole concept. So what do people refer to it as?
We refer to this as a vibrant village. So we're really big focus in our practice, and myself has a real passion around creating vibrant communities. And for us, it's not just the built form of the spaces that we're creating here, it's how we can create an environment, an atmosphere and a place where there's an alternate way of living even in the outer growth areas, and to be able to provide a different lifestyle option.
And it's really thinking past that front door, isn't it? Often when we're looking for new homes now, we get caught up in what the home looks like, and we might think a little bit about what the driveway's like, but to think about, can I walk to the local shops? Is there a park nearby? Some of the amenity around, and just how do you get that neighbourhood feel?
Yeah.
It doesn't just happen accidentally, does it?
No, that's right. I mean, that was the purpose of what the book was about. It's about how we can create more vibrant, livable, healthy and sustainable places. And the view, I guess, is that we can just design single facilities in isolation, but if we can start to consider the way people live, work, play, and not just in the built forms, as in apartments or townhouses, retail, medical, health facilities, but also start to think, where are the social places? Where can people, what we call, have that third place? So a park or a coffee shop or something like that. So you put all of those pieces together and you start to get a more vibrant place than just the basics.
I'm really looking forward to seeing more of the detail behind this. But Jordan, how do you feel about a project like this, and how did you become involved?
So we started at the early stage about 4 years ago. Villawood, we actually developed the rest of the Villawood, the Alamander estate, got us involved to look at some initial master planning, and it was really about creating an urban precinct in a car-based community. So it was an exciting project for us. We got to challenge a lot of, tested a lot of new ideas, so ways that people don't have the reliance on the car. You can almost live, work and play in Soho Village. So you'll see as we look a bit later, there's home offices, there's actual offices, there's medical facilities. So all of those pieces of the puzzle that a town centre would have, we've tried to put them all together into a really small urban precinct.
And metres from your doorstep, you know, it's very unusual in growing outer urban areas to be able to walk out of your front door, go to a medical centre, get your nails done, go to church, have a play with the kids in the park, and you really, and when with a walk, it's less than a 5-minute walk. It's probably a 1-minute walk. So really unusual, and to hear that it's had such success will no doubt create a model that'll start to be duplicated in other areas. Is there plans for that?
Very much so. The model of this is really around walkability, more compact urban living, like we said. So this has been a fairly untested style of development or market, what's being proposed here in Point Cook. So the developer that we're working with, MassBuild, we've been working with him on other projects around the state and with other developers that are starting to get an understanding that if you can develop a whole village precinct as opposed to just townhouses or just the retail component, then it starts to become a different marketing option, but it also becomes a real lifestyle choice that people are gravitating towards. There's a real plus to the overall view of it.
Yeah, and you said a key word there. It's everything that we do. It's really all about people, and we kind of forget about that sometimes. So it's really good to see a project like this has put people front and centre.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see a little bit more about the detail of some of the retail and some of the other things that we've pointed out, especially the housing. So should we take a closer look?
Sounds good.
So we've clearly moved locations now. Where are we?
Well, this is what we'd call the village square. So this is the place, I guess, that we see as the epicentre of this urban village. And when we design these types of facilities, we always think people first. How are these places going to be used, not just by the people living here, but people that come and visit to these sorts of places. So the village square acts as the attractor. So the parks connect to it. There's spaces for community markets. There's spaces for outdoor dining. And we've created a mini main street behind us where even in this fairly compact development, we're able to create a sense of place where there's a face to it. There's a main street. There's spaces for activities to happen. We even designed it in a way that the main street could be shut down at certain periods and elements of the site are accessible from different directions so that we can close the street down, have public events, cheese and wine festivals or community markets, and just start to think how people are going to start to connect. So it becomes the fun centre of town.
It's really winding back the clock to the way things were, isn't it? And we've forgotten it along the way. So it's those little things, just being able to have a marketplace or a street barbecue, which really adds to the vibrancy.
That's right, and being able to tap into what's already around the development as well, a lake and childcare and children's playground, then the idea is to connect into that space rather than being inward-looking development per se.
Two things that stand out for me just where we're standing is one, the bench seating that's around, which again seems, feels like it really encourages people, hang out. You don't need to go back into your apartments or your townhouses, hang out, just be.
Yeah, a big part of that is how we get a diversity of uses around us. So on one side of this village square is a 4-storey apartment building, but with restaurants underneath. So you're seeing that nighttime activation. People can come out on the benches or just grab a coffee or a cold drink out on the tables and chairs outside. So it's trying to, I guess, plant the seeds for more active, vibrant places.
The other thing that stands out to me is that you mentioned before how the town square is connected to the parklands that we were just walking through. And this could have easily been additional retail space, but there was a decision made to, no, let's keep it open so that we have that connection. And it would have been a real crime to have closed that off. So, Jordan, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the idea with that was really to connect back to the community. So we've got such a strong community asset here with the wetlands, the children's play area, and this whole space is focused on pedestrians. That's why we've got the bench seating, even the way that we've cranked the road behind us instead of having the road just go straight through. So we haven't given vehicles the priority. We've got a shared zone through there, so it's shared between vehicles and pedestrians. So cars don't have the priority in this zone. It's all about the pedestrian.
It's all about the people. That's just the underlying theme for everything, isn't it? So tell us a little bit about the retail that's around here, what's available, and rumour has it they were hand-picked as such.
Yeah, so we spent about 12 months hand-picking our specific retail uses. So fronting onto the town square, we've got 2 restaurants that trade really well, have a big focus on outdoor dining. Down along the main street, we've got a diversity of uses. So there's a cider, a local brewery, fish and chip shop. We've got a boutique supermarket, which sort of anchors all the retail of our development. We've got bakeries, medical centres, dentists, nail salons, every piece that you'd expect in the town centre, we've tried to condense in this small little precinct.
So Jordan, we've talked about some of the things that exist here now in a relatively new development, but there's still some more things to come. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so over the next few months, 300-seat church will be finished with a childcare centre on top. We really see that as a community facility, community asset. So it's going to be a shared use facility where the community can actually utilise that auditorium space. There's some office space in there that local councils and community groups can use as well. And then there's a 600 square metre office to come as well, which is going to be taken over by the local real estate agent.
Just a few extra things. That is already a very vibrant community. And what does this mean? Why is this unique?
What we're able to do at Soho Village is really test some different way of thinking around some of these mix of uses and the way they complement each other. So to be able to do a small development like this where we can integrate a church, it becomes effectively a conference centre or a community facility. And the operators of that building will be letting the public use the space. As Jordan mentioned, there's a childcare centre up on top as well. So it gets week around use. But what is a real benefit of it is then we're not duplicating car parking. So the car parking is centralised, but that way we get shared use through that car park space rather than doing the required number of cars for every single use. We'd end up taking up the entire site with a car park.
And we mentioned offices before. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, we initially had another plan for a second apartment building, but there was a bit of interest generated around office use. And we were really excited by that opportunity because then it really does allow us to test that live, work, play type idea. So a local real estate agent took a space. The building ended up being 1,200 square metres, and then they didn't need all that, so we're able to then introduce some other uses there as well, which are complementary. So then that helps even activate the restaurants and the cafes during lunchtime hours and things as well.
Great. Well, it sounds like the town centre's starting to buzz now, which is really what we want, isn't it?
That's right.
So we're in front of the residential area now, and there's a real mix of housing, which we've touched on a little bit. But what are the opportunities here?
Housing diversity was a really big driver of this development. Soho is surrounded by fairly typical housing subdivision, so working with the developer, they didn't want to just provide more of the same. So the idea on this one parcel was to offer a variety of different uses or different housing options, and that varies from two-storey more typical townhouses and some of those with reverse living. Then there's some townhouses that are on their own strata title, so they can be built, treated, operate a little bit differently than the ones that are on the larger super lots. Then there's some three-storey townhouses which are purely rear-loaded garages where there's no backyard, just a balcony for your first floor living. And then we introduce home offices as a different offer once again, where they can have a ground level office. And then finally there's an apartment building. And apartments were very untested in this market, but it sold really well.
It just offers such a different opportunity for people living in this area that, you know, really your options are 3-4 bedroom plus houses. But if you wanted, you know, just your 1, your 2 bedroom, you did not want to worry about a yard, this gives you all of that. And you can walk to the supermarket and drop your kids off at childcare and do a little hot yoga.
Yeah. I think what goes hand in hand with housing diversity is that lifestyle choice. Yeah. So we found that the apartment buildings sold really well to retirees because they're wanting to be near their kids that might live in the general area, but also have that lifestyle at your doorstep. Yeah. And first home buyers are able to buy into apartments because they're more affordable without being affordable housing as such. And then the townhouses offered a variety of 3 and 4 bedroom townhouses, once again with that lifestyle option at your doorstep.
What are your thoughts on the housing that's on offer here, Jordan?
I think density was really important to us as well. So people were willing to sacrifice a bit of, you know, larger house, some more land if they had good public amenity around them. So here we've got the density of this compared to the rest of Point Cook's was probably about 4 times. So we've got lots of, you know, people living in sort of 3-bedroom townhouses with small living areas, but they've got the park, the wetlands, the town square, everything right at their doorstep. So they're willing to sacrifice that because of all the good public amenity that we've provided them.
Yeah, no, it really is really unusual for this part of Melbourne. Another question I wanted to ask you about was the home office, which you can see on the lower floor of some of the townhouses. Again, really unique, and from what I understand is really allowing for people to work very close from home, where there'd be a number of people around these areas that would easily travel 2-3 hours a day just commuting in their cars for work. So how did that come to be?
A real focus is to try and bring jobs to communities or jobs to suburban settings. It's often easier said than done, but we've found that time is progressing where people are now really doing a lot more home-based businesses, and that can vary from nails and beauty through to accountancy or graphic design or any home-based trade where you can have 1 or 2 staff. And if you have it on your ground floor and you live above, it's kind of referring back to the old Main Street mentality where you have shop-top living. It really is a viable option, but it's again needed to be tested a little bit, and we're starting to really see that come to pass here now with some of those tenancies starting to be filled.
What are your thoughts, Jordan?
Yeah, you'll see with the townhouses, especially the Sohos, so we have almost a 0 lot setback. So the lower level is what we call a home office or an additional bedroom. So it means that bedroom is pushed right up to the lot boundary. So they can basically, if you're running a home office through there, you can trade straight off your front door onto the car park. So it gives people, once again, that additional diversity that they don't have in the rest of Point Cook.
And I think you've both mentioned that this was something new that was being tested, especially in the western suburbs of Melbourne. And you weren't too sure how it would go, but from all accounts, how's it doing?
Well, some of these residents have only moved in the last month, so we're just starting to see the fruit of it now. We're starting to see a few signs go up, they've been sold with that intention that they're going to be a home office, and it allows the future proofing so that it can still operate in a range of different uses. So we think it's going to be successful, and we're testing this with the developer on other sites around Point Cook as well, because there is a market for it. But it often takes someone with some foresight and vision to be able to step out and do it and see how the market responds. And yeah, I guess the market has responded positively.
And our next step to this is actually do a place activation. So we're not just going to dump this development on the local residents and say, you get to know your neighbours, you figure out how to live here by yourself. We're actually trying to build community groups. So we're going to facilitate some community barbecues, community get-togethers, so people can actually get to know their residents, really build a strong community, living so close that we think it's really important that people get to know their neighbours as well.
Perfect time with Christmas and New Year's just around the corner.
That's right.
Well, guys, I'm exhausted from all this walking around, so I'm glad that we've decided to take a break and have a coffee and a scroll at the local bakery. And it's called Soho Bakery, and I've been meaning to ask, where did Soho Village come from? Where'd the name come from? I can feel jokes coming on. Go on. What is it?
Well, it's actually two meanings. Often people associate it with the small office, home office, but the real meaning behind it was about trying to create more of a cosmopolitan living option, that urban village, and it was really taken from New York, and hence some of the street names around Tribeca and Adelphi starting to try and make references back to that lifestyle.
Do you have a theory as well? Is that your answer too, Jordan?
I thought we named it after south of Hoppers Crossing.
That one works as well, doesn't it? And the other thing, I mean, we've touched on this throughout and how the underlying theme for the development really is about people. But how did some of the urban design elements and principles fit in with that as well?
That was a really big driver. It was to try and get more than just a phrase saying it's a walkable place, but to really think that through of how people will walk through the place. So each of the key vistas as you move through the site brings the walker or the eye line of sight back to the village square, and some of those key built forms really anchor that, especially in a context where we're surrounded by 1- and 2-story buildings. The bigger built form, 4-story buildings, 3-story buildings actually frame some of the spaces and help with that wayfinding. So the urban design was a really big driver behind it, and it really challenged the boundaries a little bit. We were really happy to be able to work with the City of Wyndham to be able to test some different ways or approaches that we've designed the streetscape here. And that's looking at narrower streets where there's some engineering challenges there around this centralisation of car parking so that it's not out on the main road but more centralised where it's still accessible, usable, but not the dominant feature. And even some of the spaces around shared pedestrian zones and vehicle zones, just starting to get an understanding of how can we do it better, and to be able to work with a developer that was willing to test ideas, a council that we're able to work with to tease them out and make it work has been a really good exercise.
How did you find it, Jordan?
Yeah, it was really good. It's a really interesting process. Working with an innovative developer, MassBuild, we're really able to challenge a lot of councils' ideas about what these sorts of outer urban precincts should be. As Dean was touching on, we pushed their boundaries pretty hard in terms of road widths. So council really on board, service authorities were really on board because they could see the vision of what we were trying to create. So the approval process took a lot longer than originally envisaged, but it's really become a bit of a test case for council on how they can push developers a bit harder to create more walkable, more connected communities.
So just a model community in more ways than one. Now, the show is called Sacred Spaces, so I do like to ask all our people that we chat with about if you could choose a sacred space within this project or this precinct, what would it be? So I'll go to you first, Jordan.
Mine would actually be that top balcony of the top apartment up there. You get probably one of the best views back to Melbourne that I've ever seen. You realise how flat the western suburbs are, but it's probably, it'd be the best view in the west of Melbourne, I reckon.
A little secret, little hidden gem. And how about yourself, Dean?
I've probably got to say the whole thing, the idea of the book that I wrote around how we can create more vibrant communities. In my mind, this is a microcosm of that, and the fact that we're being able to pull all these different pieces of what I call that puzzle together, the hard elements, and start to think through those soft elements of people, place. For me, it all comes together here, and small 1.9 hectare site, and I think it's a good benchmark project, and we're looking to take this and scale it up in other sites as well. So for me, it might be a cop-out answer, but it's the whole thing.
No, not at all. It really puts the theory into practice, doesn't it? Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and taking us around Soho Village. It's been really enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Michaela Drieberg. You've been watching Sacred Spaces, and we'll see you next time.